Well, good morning, YouTube. Over at the shop today, get things all opened up and ready to go. Today's project is finishing up this Goldwing that's been sitting here for 2 weeks because we've been out of town. All of the parts have now come in, so we're gonna go ahead and finish doing the project. But there's a small project I'm gonna do ahead of time. If you just saw in that clip as I opened up the door and I flipped on the light switches, it's still pretty dark in here. If you recall back even further than that, a little over a year ago, when we ran new wiring in this building and I installed all these light receptacles, we put these bulbs in that are like these LED like garage lights. I wasn't looking for super bright light in this area because this wasn't really an area that was designed to like be doing projects. It was more of a storage area. I just needed to be able to see to get what I needed. They were cheap, inexpensive. So I put them in. They did a great job. But like 8 months later, one of them quit working. And a couple months later, another one quit working. So now out of the 8, there are only 2 that are still working. And yeah, this area is dark. So I ordered some more cheap piece of crap lights from Amazon. We're gonna put them in. I did try to reach out to this company and tell them how disappointed I was that the product didn't last. Never heard back from them. You know, the deal with LED is it's supposed to last longer and use less power. So really disappointed in how short-lived they were. I expected some life. But what do you expect from, you know, LED lights made in China? Of course, I don't know where else they're made, but we're gonna take a couple minutes to throw these in, see if it changes the atmosphere. All right, so I have replaced 4 of the lights and it looks much better in here. Now there's one over there that I didn't bother trying up there just because I got so much crap in this area. I didn't feel like moving it all to be able to get a ladder over there. But I did find something interesting. The very first one that I changed, look, the whole center section of that is just kind of melted and destroyed. Kind of odd. I also noticed that, you see how set down that center contact is? It's like just barely sticking up past the threads. Here's what one of the new ones looks like. It sticks out past the threads pretty well. Ironically, the second one, it's like pushed all the way in and like loose. Maybe it just wasn't making good contact. The third one has some kind of weird dent in the threads, and it still seems pretty low. The fourth one, same thing, pretty low. When I got to the fifth one, this one over here right by the ladder, when I got up there, I kind of noticed it was a little loose. So I just started screwing it in first, and it came on. So I wonder if somehow under use, these are being recessed in, or maybe I over-tightened them. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. So some of these bulbs may actually still be good if they were to be repaired. I don't know if I'm going to take the time to repair them. They're almost too cheap to replace. But now I still have 5 spares just in case. And this time, while I was threading these into the receptacle, the switches were on. So I saw when they came on, I just gave them a little bit more of a turn. I'm wondering if maybe the last time I did this, maybe the switches weren't on. Maybe I threaded them all in and then I flipped the switches. So maybe I just over tightened them, and maybe I did that. Maybe I pushed that down far because it's relatively consistent. Either way, it shows how crappily they're built, that by over tightening them, you can crush them. You would think that they would take a little bit more resistance. It's not like I forced them in there. I just snugged them up until they seated, or so I thought. All right, now that all that is done, we're gonna get back on the Goldwing project. So now if you watched the video before we went to Smoky Mountain Bike Week, actually I think it was before we went to Ocean City Bike Week, we went ahead and did an oil change, engine oil filter change, and changed the oil in the final drive on this Goldwing GL 1800. This is a 2005 unit. If I remember, I'll link that video in the description. But this motorcycle has been sitting for about 6 years before my friend Gene got it. So we are gonna kind of give it a good going over. We checked the tires, and it looks like somebody just put brand new tires on it, which is good. But a few other things we saw that needed. The rear brake pads were pretty much shot. Front brake pads, yeah, just so-so. So we just figured we'd go ahead and put brake pads all the way around it. And when we do that, we're going to go ahead and flush all of the brake system out as well with fresh, brand new fluid. I think we're going to do the clutch too. That way the brakes and the clutch, everything there should be good. The other thing Gene asked for was windshield. This one's pretty scratched up and not in good shape, so he wanted to go with something a little bit different. So I did order him a new windshield as well. He also didn't like the grips that were on it. They were like the Kiriakin style ISO grips. They were just a little bit too big for him. He wasn't comfortable with them. He wanted something smaller. So we ordered new grips as well. All right, and here is our parts lineup. For brake pads, we're using EBC, the FA261Hs, pretty much all the way around. Well, at least I hope that's right. I don't remember all three of the brake pads being the same when I ordered them, but I'll double check that. Air filter, because it's been sitting so long, we're just putting an air filter in it. I know it may not need it, but the thing is on a Goldwing, it's very difficult to get to the air filter. It takes a couple hours of work to replace an air filter. So if I'm going to go through the effort to get to it, to inspect it, I'm just throwing a new one in there. That way we know it's good and he doesn't have to worry about it for quite a while. When it comes to the hand grips, I found these hand grips through my Parts Unlimited catalog that are like the OEM replacement Honda. And for Gene, I think that's what he's going to like. Is going to get the smaller diameter, more comfortable in easy OEM. Now, a slight caveat with that. The grips that were on the motorcycle, like I said, were these ISO grips. They're chrome. They got these big pads on it. A lot of people love them because they're more comfortable, but Gene just didn't care for them. But if you see, they've got an end cap on them that screws on. And well, the new grips that we got don't. You see, you can see right through them, right? So I also ordered a set of bar end weights from Pingle. Got some of these stainless steel or aluminum weights to kind of finish off the look. And sometimes it helps with vibration at the end of the bars as well. And for the windshield, we decided to go with a Klockwerks. It's a little bit more expensive than some of the other windshield options, but it's got the nice little kick up at the top, and it should really help smooth out the airflow and make Gene's ride a lot more comfortable. So we're going to start with the harder parts first, and that's going to be doing the brakes and the brake flush. Everything else should be relatively simple. Well, other than that air filter maybe. But yeah, I want to get the mechanical stuff done first, and then we'll worry about the frou-frou-ier stuff. Frou-frou-ier? Whatever. I'm just making up words now. All right, guys, on the GL 1800, you don't actually have to remove the brake caliper to change the pads. There's a rubber cap here. We pull this cap off. You'll see there's a 5mm Allen on the inside of there. And once we remove that pin, we'll be able to access the brake pads and slide them out. Now, before actually removing the pin, I'm going to reach up here and just try to spread these brake pads out a little bit to free up some space to be able to slide these out. Now, normally, I wouldn't recommend using a screwdriver, but we're replacing these brake pads anyways because they're shot. So I'm not worried about hurting them, but you do want to be careful not to scratch up the rotor. So I just kind of get it up in there and then just give it a little bit of a pull and it'll just push that piston back into the caliper a little bit. All right, once that's done, you'll see, then you get some good free movement in that caliper back and forth. So you got room to get them out without any pressure being on them. All right, once the pin is unthreaded, you just be able to pull it out. Looky there, one brake pad just fell out. The other one almost fell out. See how thin these were? Now, if you look closely, there is still a little bit of meat on that outer pad. It wasn't too bad. But when you look at the inner pad, if I don't throw it across the shop. All right, take two. As I was saying, with the inner pad, the friction material is almost gone. I mean, any further, and these would have been digging into the rotor. In fact, you can see one spot there where it looks like it just started to touch the rotor. But I felt the rotor, and I don't feel that there's any damage that's worth really worrying about. So a new pad replacement should fix all of the problem there. My concern is that they were wearing slightly unevenly, not terrible. So hopefully us exercising that caliper back and forth will actually help maybe clean up some of that stuff. I'm gonna get up there and clean it out with some brake clean as well while I've got the pads out. All right, earlier I mentioned that they were the same part numbers here, and I was wrong. If you look, this is FA 261HH, same thing here. This is FA 261 2HH. So what that means is the backing plates are the same, right? Identical as far as physical dimensions of the backing plate. But if you look really close at how thick the friction material is on the 2HH compared to the standard HH, considerably thicker for the rear brake pad. Now, for those of you that know, the Goldwing does have a linked brake system. So when you apply the front brakes, it automatically applies a little bit of rear brake. And if you apply the rear brake, it applies pressure to the front brakes. But it works well. Honda's been doing it for years. All right, so that should just be as simple as taking the new brake pads, sliding them into their place, and putting that pin in. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and clean that pin a little bit as well. And I just want to make sure there isn't a bunch of crud that would stop it from wanting to go in there and center properly. And you can see it's definitely a little cruddy. And crud no more. All right, so I'm trying to slide the inside brake pad in first because it is the one a little bit more challenging to get to. Put a little pressure on the brake caliper and slide it up into place. And then put the outer in as well. As long as I've got those pistons back far enough, it should just slide into place. It's a little tight, but it's going. All right, well, I struggled with it for a little bit, but I finally got it in there. And now we're just putting the pin back in. And we will torque it down to 13 foot-pounds. And then pop our rubber cap right back in. Check to make sure the wheel moves freely. And it does. And then run over here and pump up the brake, take up any slack that's in it. All good. Now I will add that I do have the motorcycle up on a flat jack while I did that. One, so I can move the wheel to check for free movement once the job was done. But also because raising the motorcycle up just gives that wheel a little bit to drop down. It gets that caliper a little bit closer to the bottom of that exhaust pipe over there. It just gives you a little bit more room, a little bit more visibility. Not necessary to do the job that we did. It just makes it easier, I think. Now the process for the front calipers should be exactly the same, but much easier to get to. Clearly see that the front brake pads were nowhere near as worn out as the rears. They still had a decent amount of life left on them, but you know what? Gene won't have to worry about it anytime soon. Okay, now that we are done installing our brake pads, we're going to move to flushing the brakes. Now, you guys have seen me flush brakes in other videos, so probably not going to get to a whole lot of detail in the actual flushing process. However, on the Goldwing, the GL 1800, there is a procedure, and it gets a little bit tricky because of the linked brake system and one other system that a lot of people forget about. So, to get started, I've basically removed the front fender. Now, on each side of the fender, there are two bolt holes, or two bolts, right? And then they will actually hold this cover around the fork, and then there's two bolts that hold the back. So you got a total of 8 bolts, and then the front portion of the fender and both of the side covers will come off, and just set them to the side for right now. And then I've got the side cover off of the side of the motorcycle so I get to the reservoir for the rear brake master cylinder. So here's where it gets a little bit complicated. If you look at each brake caliper, there are 2 lines going to all 3 calipers. So a total of 6 lines at calipers. There's 2 bleeder screws on each caliper, a lower bleeder screw and an upper bleeder screw. Same thing on the rear caliper. So the procedure that I'm going to use is I'm going to bleed the front brakes first. And what I'm going to do is come down here and bleed from the upper right-hand brake caliper first. And when I get clear fluid out of there, I will move to the other brake caliper and remove the lower bleeder screw. And that will get fresh fluid over to that side as well. But here's what's a little bit tricky is not just the brakes. We've also got this device here, which is the anti-dive valve. You know what? Gene's calling me. I'll be back in a minute. Where was I? Oh yeah. On this side of the bike, we also have an anti-dive system. Now it's linked more to the rear brake, but you see there's an extra master cylinder built in right here behind the fork tube. And somehow it adds pressure to this little piston here so that it stops your forks from diving really hard under hard braking when you're using both brakes, or at least just the rear brake. So once we're done bleeding the front brakes, all right, so we're gonna bleed the top right bleeder and then the bottom left bleeder. And then we move to the rear master cylinder where we'll come over here and bleed the upper right bleeder, go to the other side and bleed the lower right bleeder, right? And then we will bleed the anti-dive system, and then we'll go back and bleed the rear caliper, both bleeders. So yeah, so you've got a total of 7 bleeders that we're gonna be bleeding here. It's a little bit of a process, but the concept is the same. Just take your time, get clean fluid through it. Well, this is proving to be very difficult to do with one hand, but yeah, typical to the way I bleed brakes is I'm going to suck all of the old fluid out of the reservoir first, clean the reservoir, and then we'll put fresh fluid in it and start the bleed process, that we're not trying to push all this stuff through the whole system. And with all the fluid gone, you can see all the sediment and sludge that is in the bottom of this master cylinder. That's what we wanted to catch early. There's just no sense in flushing all that through, so we'll get this really good and clean before we proceed. All right, a shop rag and a tip of a screwdriver, got that pretty clean. Now for some fresh fluid. And of course, nothing but the best. We're gonna be using the Amsoil DOT 3 and 4 brake fluid to do this entire process with. All right, you guys have seen I've done this in the past. I always keep my hose running up. That way the air bubbles will travel up. Once they get to the top, then the gravity will bring the fluid down into a catch container. But this way, when you let go of the lever, it won't suck the air bubbles back in because it'll all be fluid through here. The air bubbles will rush to the top. So let's break it loose and get started. So you can see the fluid come out. But as I pump it, no air goes back in. And we're just gonna keep pumping till it's all fresh and clean. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's definitely flowing into the bottle. And our level here is dropping. One-man operation. Just keep pumping. When you do it like this, there's no reason to do the pump and build pressure and then crack it loose and bleed it out. This is just the faster, easier way to do it. It's time to add more fluid already. So it looks like we've got really good fresh fluid coming out of there already. So we're gonna close this bleeder and move to the other side. But you see my air bubble is up here, not down here, so it doesn't get sucked back in. Okay, so we bled the top right bleeder and the bottom left bleeder. So all the front fluid has basically been changed. We've topped off our reservoir again, and we've got a really good, firm brake feel. So we'll cap that back off and move to the rear system. All right, making sure all of these parts are cleaned and dried. We just reassemble them all back together. And as you can see, even the rear fluid's pretty old and yucky. You can tell that there's moisture content as well as other contaminants in there too. So we'll get it all cleaned up. All right, and here's a little tip. The way this is normally positioned up against the frame, slightly underneath this bodywork, it makes it very challenging to clean and access, right? So I take out the one bolt and hang it free to do all my cleaning. But before I start bleeding again, I zip tie it to these cables. Now these cables run over top of this normally. They make it really hard to pour your fluid in there. But that keeps it from wanting to dump and spill while we do the process. And when it's all said and done, we'll cut the zip tie and bolt it right back in here where it goes. Let all the air that's in that hose belch to the top. And now that our rear master cylinder reservoir is cleaned and filled to the top, we'll start the bleeding procedure exactly opposite of what we did with the front brake. So now we're going to move to the left side caliper first, and we're talking about front caliper, not rear. We're at the front of the motorcycle. We will bleed the top bleeder screw first, and then we'll move to the right side and bleed the lower screw on the front right caliper. So I've cracked the bleeder open, and I only pumped it a couple of times, and you can see how cloudy the fluid coming out of there is, but our air bubbles have moved to the top. So I'm going to go keep pumping for a little bit. Come back over here and just pump away while watching the level of my reservoir. All right, let's go check. And now our fluid coming out of there is much more clear, but I think I'm going to give it a little bit more. So I'll top off my reservoir and pump another round through. All right, now we can see that our fluid here is nice and clear, so we'll lock this down and move to the other side. All right, so this ought to be easier because we'll be able to see what we're doing. So I'm cracking that bleeder loose. Come over here and start pumping. There you can see the yucky fluid coming out. You see when I let go, it doesn't suck it all the way back in. Just keep on pumping. I'm gonna come over here, watch my reservoir, and check my fluid. Looking pretty clear. Give just a little bit more. Stuff like this, I'd rather use a little extra fluid just to know that I went the extra mile. There we go. Now we're nice and clear. So we'll lock that back down. And we didn't introduce any air to the system. Top and back off. And with the rear brake reservoir topped off one more time, we're moving to the anti-dive. Gonna crack that open and go press the pedal again. Give that just a couple of pumps. Make sure that it's feeding fluid, and it is. Actually looks pretty clear already, but we're just gonna go ahead and cycle a few pumps through no matter what, just to make sure. Not letting the reservoir run dry. And you can see our fluid here, crystal clear, so lock it back down. All right, on the rear caliper, same thing. You see there's a lower bleeder right there and an upper bleeder right there. I'm gonna start with the top one, and then we'll do the bottom one. All right, I did the rear bleeders, but kind of tough to get the camera angle in there right. My head was kind of in the way, so I just did it, didn't really film much of it. Now we're gonna top our reservoir back off to the full line, and then bolt the reservoir back in place with the cap on it and call the brakes done. All right, I've reinstalled all of my dust caps and I've checked once again. We got really good pressure and feel, really good pressure and feel up here in the front. We're gonna call the brakes done. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the clutch. Okay, so now that we're done with the brakes, we're gonna move on to flushing the clutch system out as well. Now, in order to do that, first you've got to take off this lower cowling that's right behind your front wheel. And then there's actually a canister that you got to take out. So if you look right here, this canister's got to go. There are just two little 10mm bolts on top. Once you undo them, this will kind of fall down out of the way. And the clutch slave cylinder is right behind that. All right, it wasn't easy, but I got the wrench on it. I've got the hose on it. Now I'm just going to go up and clean the master cylinder, and we'll do the same process. All right, so the clutch system is bled, and I've put the canister back in place after capping everything back off. But I will tell you, this is one of those jobs. The two bolts that take that canister off, it's where a really good ratchet wrench comes in handy. They're 10mm head bolts, but they're just in a spot that's really hard to get to. There's stuff right up above it, and you really can't kind of get on top of it, so a ratchet wrench works perfect. Now, I said a really good ratchet wrench. I have a ratchet wrench here. I don't consider a really good one. If you look, not a lot of indexing in it, so the ratchet mechanism's only got a few spots or stops, and it's not like a 72 tooth or anything like that. This is this is probably back when ratchet wrenches first came out. This is actually a Husky brand. I probably got this from Home Depot back in 91, 92. I don't know. So they're at least 30, 35 years old. I don't know. Before gear wrench was a thing and so on and so forth. But, you know, they were great to have at the time, but they've also got these really big heads. Just don't fit in as well. Fortunately, all my other really good ratchet wrenches are up in the trailer, and I didn't feel like making the trip to go up there to get it. But I got it done. Just took a little bit longer. And actually, the ratchet wrench was relatively unfruitful. I ended up just using a 10mm wrench, but it was one where I had to get it on there, turn apart, turn, flip the wrench over, part turn, flip the wrench back over, part turn. Time consuming, but it got it done. And just in case you're interested, this is the brake fluid that came out of it. You can actually see the moisture content in there. Some pretty yucky stuff. It's quite a bit too. It took at least 1.5 12-ounce bottles. All right, well, now that we're done with brakes and the clutch, we've got two more projects, three actually. We're gonna start with the harder of them, which is gonna be the air filter replacement. Now, air filter is not easy to get to on the GL 1800. It's underneath a whole bunch of plastic. The seat's got to come off. The speaker pod dash panel's got to come off. The audio panel and what looks like the fuel tank covers all got to come off. And to do the windshield, the front piece has got to come off. So yeah, we've got a lot to do here. Probably not going to go into a super lot of detail. To be honest, it's been well over 10 years since I've put an air filter in a Goldwing. So I actually kind of did a refresher, and I think it's RevZilla's got a really good video out there on how to do it. So if you guys really want to know how to do the air filter on this, go watch that video because it's pretty good. I think we're just going to speed through this as quick as we can. All right, so to get to the air filter, this dash panel is going to come off, and it mostly, I think, just pops on. The storage compartment here and there's got to come off. This plastic strip here's got to come off to reveal some bolts that hold this whole assembly on. The seat's got to come off. The grab handle's got to come off. Side cover's got to come off. And then underneath, there's a whole bunch of plugs and stuff too, as well. So it's just going to be a bit of a process. You can see from the time lapse, it is a bit of a process to get in here. But man, am I really, really glad that we bought a new filter for this, because look what I just found as I got this airbox lid off. So definitely it looks like we had some critters making nests in here. Definitely some yucky, yucky stuff. So now I gotta try to get that out of there, and I gotta be pretty careful with it because I don't want any of that debris to fall down into the intake. This is the dirty side of the air filter where the air comes in. So everything past this should be the clean side. Hopefully nothing got past this filter and it'll be clean inside of the lower section of the airbox. But yeah, that's pretty nasty. I'm glad I didn't inspect it first and then go, well, we got to order one. I just knew that after all this work, we're going to put one in. All right, luckily, as I pick it up, you can see nothing made it through the metal screen on the bottom. The inside of the airbox actually looks pretty clean. A little bit of oil residue from the crankcase ventilation, which is perfectly normal. And a nice, fresh, minty one going back in its place. Get it all in here and seated properly. There we go. Put the airbox back together. All right, so I put the air filter in. I put the airbox lid back on, tightened down all the screws, and I've just set the cruise control module back on. Haven't bolted it down yet, but I figure while I'm in here, the radiator cap radiators are right here. We're going to go ahead and check all of that. Well, at least it's full. It's got engine ice in it, which is some pretty good stuff. I think we're going to just leave that as it is. All right, just a helpful tip if anyone's doing it. These bolts that hold the ABS module down, they're a shouldered bolt. So make sure that you put them all four in loosely, and then you kind of wiggle this around and you'll get them to set down in. Otherwise, you'll actually pinch the plastic. But once all four of them locate on the shoulder, then it acts like a torque limiter. The larger shoulder will drop into the bigger hole in the plastic, and then once you torque it down, that shoulder actually stops you from over tightening it and like smushing the plastic out. These little bolts don't have to be torqued very much. I don't remember what the spec is, just like a half of Ooga Dooga is all it is. You just want them snug. All right, well, it seems I've got all of that back together. I did notice a few things, like he was missing a few screws here and there. A couple of them I was able to find in my bolt bin and replace. Notice that the speakers that are in here aren't the right speakers. They don't mount up to the actual mounting hole. Someone's got that kind of jerry-rigged. But for the most part, that's all back together other than the side covers and the seat. I'm going to move on to the windshield. So I've popped the mirror out of place. I've got to take out that bolt. Same thing on the other side. And then the front panel should just pop off and reveal the bolts to our windshield. All right, and with that front cover off, you can see there's one bolt here that we've got to take loose. There'll be another one here and another one here, but we'll have to slide the windshield down to get to those. So we'll take this one out first since we have access to it. But when I slide it down, there's one more in there as well. So the total of 4 bolts holding the windshield on. All right, and on the ones on the sides, don't lose the little plastic washer that slides on there. And then the captured nut part piece will just slide right down. Now we should be able to pull the windshield out of there. And there we go. No more windshield. Now let's unbox this Klockwerks one and see how it looks. All right, the windshield that we took out, which I don't know was OEM. It looks a little taller than stock. And then here is the Klockwerks. Not only did we go with a smoked color, you see it's not quite clear, but it's also got the lip up here and a little bit of a flare over here. Should be better all around. All right, so I've transferred that center plate over to the new windshield. I noticed that this windshield has a place for 5 mounting points. The old windshield only had 3. And this is set up for 5, but it doesn't have the slide bolts in the other 2. So I guess we're just going to mount it back with 3. All right, easy peasy. Just the 4 bolts back on, and now time to put that front cover back on. All right, well, just my luck. I've got the entire bike back together. Everything is tight. Everything is perfect. The only thing I've actually got left to do is I need to transfer the vent from this windshield and put it into that windshield. Now, it's only 2 little bolts sandwiched together, pretty quick and easy. But I can't reach it up there, right? So I went to go lower the lift down. And somehow I blew the seal on the lift when I did it. So now I can't lift the motorcycle up off of the lock in order to lower it down. The bike is finished and it's stuck there, at least until tomorrow. I'll figure something out. I'll probably just move another lift over here, roll the bike from one to the other, lower it down. It's just gonna be a pain in the butt. And I'll probably need a helper here just for safety. But I'm just gonna grab a step ladder and I guess I'm gonna get that vent in just so that the motorcycle is officially done. All right, I even got the grips and the handlebar weights put on and well, they look stupid. They're not long enough. I I don't know, I guess I just picked the wrong parts, but this gap shouldn't be here between the weight and the grip. But if I slide the grip off, then this gap over here gets bigger. I thought maybe I could slide the switch housings down, but they're located. I can't. The cables aren't long enough to slide them down either. So I don't know. I thought this would be the right grip for this bike, and I was wrong. Luckily, grips are easy to change in the future. It will be rideable. So he'll be able to come get it tomorrow and have it. Maybe when we get back from our next trip, we can come up with another solution. Just irritates me because I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Oh well, it is what it is. All right, guys, we're gonna end this video here. Well, as you can see, it's dark outside now. I know Katie's got dinner going, and I'm over it. Plain and simple, I'm over it. So yeah, I'm gonna go home, take a shower, and relax a little bit. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content on the GL 1800. I know it's not the typical motorcycle we work on, but yet it's a motorcycle and it needed to be worked on, so we did it. All right, guys, until the next time I see you, keep those engines running.